This video will talk about the medieval era. So, what is the Catholic Church about in the medieval era or the Middle Age? So, we'll talk about this, and I hope you like this video. And before I will start, disclaimer that this video is for grades only, is not promoted about the religion. So, this video is we talk about on only the history and what we need to learn about the Catholic Church. So this video I will reflect sometimes the the history and also the picture, and later I will flash the video that I make, so you watch this video so you can understand more, or you more understand about the history of this. Let's start it. In the Middle Age, there was the defined structure in the society. You were born into the classic of people and generally stayed in that class for your entire life. Working hard did not change your status. Your clothing and food as the marriage and home and etc. were determined for you. After the rank of king, was the nobles of the knights as clergy, religious people that shunned the tradesmen of the peasants. So now let's start to talk about the church. So let's start it. So we have about the church of the medieval era. So we have the one of the most unifying elements of the Middle Age was the Roman Catholic Church. All classes and rank of people, nobles, the peasants, and tradesmen were profoundly affected by the ruling of the church. So sometimes we have the clergy were the religious of people that of the Middle Age following the Pope and the order of rank. There was the bishop, priest, monk, and nuns. I think, as I'm right, this is nuns or nuns in the latter part of the Middle Age. So the Pope as head of the church was the most influence over the king and total control of the clergy. And the latter part of Middle Age, people were heavily taxed to support the church. And the return for their tax money, they received the way for the was of the way to everlasting life, and the happiness after the leading lives was the often short and hard. Children were taught the basic prayer and to go to church every week. The Roman Catholic Church is something that was the single largest and unifying organization in the medieval Europe. It touched that everyone's life was no matter their rank or the class of their lives. So now we'll start about the clergy rank, and clothing. So we have the first as the bishop. So I think most of us is familiar about the bishop. Bishop is a part of something that serving in the church. So the church is what is bishops, that why the bishops include in the clergy rank and clothing. So let's start. Bishops were accepted in the court of general life with the same luxuries and the nobles in the Middle Age. They wore the lavish clothes. There were the hats and called mitres or meters, as I'm right, of a tall hat that looks up the pointed arch. The bishop wore the beautiful religious garment that often were jeweled. So you understand is what is the bishop. Bishop is something that they accept generally of the same luxuries of the nobles of the Middle Age. So next we have priest. You familiar what is priest is something that also the work or serving in the church. So the priests weren't the rich like the bishop. They were generally the head of the church. They often wore long black gowns. So this pictures, and I think that is the example of the priest that you know about. The priests were often wore long black gowns. So next we have the monks, if I'm right. I hope you correct me if I'm wrong, so I understand how to pronounce that, or what is the correct pronunciation about this word. So next we have the monks were often the scholarly and called read, write, and the Latin. They wore the brown gowns with hoods that often were made of wool. The gown was tied with rope around the waist. There also was often a long crown that hung straight down the front of the block. Monks were clean shaven but often they shaved a bald spot on the top of their head. Their head, called a tonsure as the symbol of humility. So that is the homes. Next, we have the nuns, were the very holy and life in the convent. They generally wore the long gowns or tunics of blacks, gray or white. It's something like that. The color that they wear, that they were tied around the waist with a cloth or little belt. Over the tunic was a scapular, which was long piece of the clothes with opening for their head. It trailed that something that down, front of the block, of their tunics. So something that some that were across where they changed around their neck, and generally their heads were shaved, and across is about the cloth of conveying the whipples. And that is the clergy rank of and clothing. So next we have the duties of this person of these people. So first we have the bishop. So the bishop is administered to needs the priest. So the bishop is something that he something he recognized, or something he assists the priest. So we have the priests are carry the spiritual life of the people and administer sacred oversoul the life of minor absolved men and women, and there is the sense of confession and made pronouncement of the community that were given by the bishop or the people. So that is the something that bishop of the pope. So next we have the monk's life of monarchies and served examples of the perfect Christian's life. There were something the scholars that sometimes copied the book of the Bible by hand. So this was the before the invention of the printing press. They also generally the word that support themselves as monastery by gardening and hand management. They also sometimes that educated. We have the last but not the least is the nuns, were the very devoted of to serve the people, and they sometimes were thought of the read and write, but they were not the scholarly as monks. They sometimes did work at manuscripts. Other less educated nuns did harder work. Many families placed their daughters in convent, that the convent was given a dowry for taking them. Elderly women who became widows were also sent to convents. They was often done so that the women would have secured life. So next we have the religious festival. The life the people revolved around the season, planting, harvesting, and electoral role that working class each month. There was the sum of type religions festival. For example, the celebrated of Saint Valentine's Day in February, when the singing, dancing, and games in March was celebrated that Easter. Fiber performing master plays and also falls the April festival with the jokes and pranks, and also the other day. I hope you understand about the medieval age or the medieval era, and this is Kyle, and again this is the history of medieval era. So next we have the persecution of the early church. Let's proceed the persecution of the early church. So let's start about the history of and the overview of the persecution of the early church. Persecution of the early church occurred that is politically localized of the areas from the start. The first persecution of Christians organized by Roman government was under Emperor Nero in 64 AD after the Great Fire of Rome, and took place entirely within the city of Rome. So Edict of Serdica issued by 311 by Roman Emperor Galerius officially ended of the Diocletianic persecution of Christianity in the East. Within that publication of N 313 AD of the Edict of Milan persecution of Christians by Roman state case. The total of the number of Christians who their lives because of this persecution is unknown. The early Christians historian Eusebius, whose works are the only source for many of these and events, speaks of the countless of number, or maybe myriads having perished. Walter Bjors characterized that evidence for this. The Robert Grant says readers were used to this kind of exaggeration, as was the comment of Jopis of the Hosipos and historians of the time. By the mid of 2nd century, mobs were willing to throw the stones of Christians, perhaps motivated by rival sects of the persecution in Leon. 117 AD was preceded by mob violence, including the assaults, robbers, and stoning. Lucian tells and elaborate by the successful hoax of the perpetrated by Prophet and Axibulus using a flame snake and Pontus, and when Romer seems about to expose his friend and the easily reports and his assassin essay. He issued that the promulgation designed to scare them, saying that Pontus was full atheist of the Christian who had the hardihood alter the values of them. This have the bane, the dream drive of the Wheatstone has wanted to have the God gracious. So that is sometimes the overview of the persecution of the early church. So we have another of in the 200 AD, the Emperor Dios issued a decree of requiring public sacrifice, a formality equivalent of testimonial allegiance to emperor that established order. There is no evidence that decree was intended to target Christians, but ended as a form loyalty oath. Authorized droving commission visiting the cities and villages to survive the execution of sacrifice, and the very written the certificates to all perform them. So that is about the 200 AD about the persecution of Arab. We have in the New Testament Acts 18:2-3, Jews named Aquila introduced, who with the wife of Priscilla had recently come from Italy because Emperor Claudius had offered the Jews to leave Rome. And sometimes the Richardson points out the term Christian only became the struggle in documents after the year 70, and that before that time beliefs in the Christ were recognized religiously as belonging totally to Jews. And this as sometimes the Norians persecutions. According to Tacitus of the later execution of tradition Nero blamed the Christians and the great fire of Rome in 64, which the destroyed portion of the city and the economical devastate of Roman population. Anthony A. Barrett has written that major archaeological endeavors have recently preceded the new evidence for the fire, but can't show who started. In the Annals of Tacitus read, that is about the Neronian persecution. And sometimes we have about the domination. Is according to some historians, the Jews of Christians were heavily persecuted towards of the end dominance of the reign of the book. So that is the dominance of the early persecution of the early church. We have the Trajan, the Emperor Trajan. This corresponded with is the plainly of the younger of the subject how deal Christians Pontirs. So that is the Trajan. We have the Hadrian, the Emperor Hadrian, 117 to 138, also responding to a request for advice of the provincial governor about how deal about the Christians. We have the Marcus Aurelius and Marcus the Thracians of the Esperidec. Both an anti-Christian activity occurred during the period from the reign of the Arius to the maximum government to the play more important role the emperors and circulation during this period. So that is the early church or the persecution of the early church. So now let's proceed to play the video that I presented for you.